My name is Kathy Davenport-Lee. I'm the VP of the Interactive Design Group that is talking today, and my pronouns are she and her. And yeah, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview about what the team is and what it does, and then we're going to go straight into some awesome speakers. So hold on one second. Okay, HBO Marketing Interactive Design. So we do a few different things. I'm just going to put these all on the screen. So we create, maintain, or art direct digital marketing materials for all of HBO shows and all of Cinemax's shows. We create content for, and we also create UI and UX for HBO.com. We collaborate with other marketing teams on joint marketing materials. That's another important point. We sit inside of the marketing team. We continue to support platform needs for HBO originals and HBO Max originals. So, you know, the HBO Max product and the HBO Now product, where you might watch HBO. There's over 25 different designers with a mixture of different design disciplines. And there's all different kinds: visual design, illustration, branding, motion design, 3D design, UX, UI design, and there's even more besides that too. Okay, so what does any of that mean? So just very simply put, we take each show is kind of its own brand, and we think about like how that brand could be applied to the digital and social space. And we do this in a bunch of different ways. I know that I think they've dropped this link into the chat, but this is our reel, and I just invite you guys to take a watch and look through it. I'm not going to play it over Zoom because it plays a little laggy sometime over the Zoom connection, so I'm just going to sort of skim through a couple highlights from it, just so you get a taste. So we have digital and social branding. A lot of the times this shows up as what we call a theme stack, and we really look at the show and say, okay, you know, this is what's in the show, this is what it's about, but what do we want to say about it, and who are we trying to say it to? Like, who's interested in this content, and how do we talk to them? So there's a lot that kind of goes into the strategy of like how you want to show up in a design. We also do a lot of these type of things that we call social mobile first assets. Also, micro content is another word, but anything that shows up on a phone in your feed, and basically the idea is that it's very short, because you only have about 3 seconds to get somebody's attention in a social feed and get them to stop. So there's a lot of different kinds of, I'm not going to read that whole list on the side, you kind of get the idea. There's a few different kinds of examples here. We also do, again, this one could be a whole presentation of itself. I won't go into it too deeply, but we also do this Transmedia Materials. And basically, each of our shows tell a story, and we use digital materials to like extend that story beyond the screen into other places. So there might be a website that goes along with the show. Like if the show, John Oliver does this a lot, he mentions something and then we make a website based on the joke. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. Westworld has a website too like that. Emerging tech materials. So, you know, the Instagram face filters that you see on Instagram, we make a lot of those. Also Snapchat, but we also do VR. We also make like Apple Watch apps, or art direct to them with an agency. And then additionally, we often work with influencers. I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard the term influencers before, but like, basically just small groups of like super fans that we can kind of work with to talk about our show and prepare materials for them to do that with. Yeah, so there's even more besides that. Again, I won't read the whole list, but we also work on things that are like red carpet activations, or events that sort of make the premiere cooler, and make it extend again to the social audience. So many decks. You're going to see lots and lots of decks. And yeah, even baked goods. We once made Damon Lindelof some cupcakes for his birthday. That was exciting. So HBO.com is a huge part of what we do as well. Also, the platform support, again, I won't go too far into it because I could go a really long time talking about that. But yeah, so that's just like a little bit of a taste of what you're going to see in that reel. And I really want to kind of hand it off to our speakers today. I know they're already introduced, but here they are again. And here am I. Also, you probably won't be seeing these folks today, but Maxwell and Paolo have been also working behind the scenes. I also want to remind you that there will be time at the end for questions, and if you could potentially think about who you would like to answer your question and address it, to that person, that'll be great. So with that being said, I would love to hand it off to Idris to get you guys started.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Idris Talib Solomon. My pronouns are he, him. I am native New Yorker. I'm from Brooklyn. And I was once in many of your shoes before, just growing up in New York City and knowing that from an early age, I wanted to pursue art, but just not knowing how to, do it professionally. So I can speak very long about this topic. So it's going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for me to like really condense it to like a really short presentation, but we want to make sure that at the end you have a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we are able to respond to the questions. So I'm gonna try to keep this as short and concise as possible. All right. So I'm going to go and share my screen, and here we go. All right. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Idris Talib Solomon. I am a photographer and art director. So here's just some fun facts about me that relate to my career. So when I went to school at Binghamton University, I created my own major, and I was one of the first students or the only student to figure out a way to create my own major. I've been fired from any job that wasn't creative, and I think that was a sign to me and my mom that maybe I should pay attention to. I would get bored easily if I was not able to express myself. My first design job was actually designing T-shirts for a clothing company. I was fired from that job also, but I think it was all about me just trying to find my rhythm and what I wanted to do creatively. My second job was as a motion graphic designer for a Catholic TV station. I have 7 years of experience working in the advertising industry. I'm a Fulbright Fellow, and a Fulbright Fellow basically, you get to present a topic and get funding to move to another country to pursue that topic. I am a self-taught photographer, and some of my clients are the New York Times, ESPN, Amazon, Reuters. My photography has taken me to Ghana to photograph West African hip hop, to Fiji to photograph athletes competing in the jungle, and I've been to France photographing drone races where the drones are flying at 90 miles an hour. I create and produce and host a podcast for Black photographers called the Black Shutter Podcast. And the reason why I mention all of these things is because I use a combination of all of these skills and experiences as an art director at HBO. So one of the big things that I think will be helpful for you to know is that you don't need to know everything. In the beginning, it might seem like intimidating trying to figure out how to get into an industry where you have to have all these multiple skills. You just have to get started. And this right here is just, I do photography, so this was just me like having fun, experimenting, but sometimes this is that internal struggle, feeling like I need to know everything, right? And these are just some like personal projects that I've always worked on. I like to just be creative, and sometimes I'll do a full day of work at HBO and then go home and design or take pictures on my free time. So for me, art is really a way of life. It's not a job. It is something that it's the way I think. It's the way I manage my life. It's the way I navigate through everything. When I'm feeling happy, I design. When I'm feeling sad, I design. If I'm stressed out, I design. I just think very creatively all the time. Another concept I want you to think about is combining your skills and your interests. This is very important because as artists, we are influenced by so many different things. This right here is a picture of my son. And a lot of people are like, yo, that is very irresponsible. Like, why would you throw your son in the air and take a picture of him, right? No, he's actually laying down on the sheet, and I'm on a ladder, and I'm photographing him from above. But this is a combination of me using my photography and and compositing him in the background so that it feels like he's flying and he has some sort of magic power. Again, this is a photograph that I've taken, and then I use my design skills, and then I've actually started to do some illustration on them as well. So here you see the actual photo on the left, and then you'll see some of the illustrations that I've done on the right. And for me, in the beginning, I was using other people's photographs to take pictures, and what started really good for me, I'm thinking, well, why am I using other people's photographs? Why don't I just use my own and illustrate them that way? And I think, we all have a voice, and I know it might sound cliche, but it's very true. We have a voice, and I think it's important to find your voice and to make it loud. This right here is the artwork for the podcast that I created. It's called the Black Shutter Podcast. And this podcast is focused on telling the stories of Black photographers. Because when I decided to do photography, I didn't see a lot of Black photographers. And, I think it's important for people to tell their own stories. So I wanted to create this platform for young Black photographers coming up to find inspiration. And I think, I want to change the narrative of how Black people are seen in this country. I want to make sure that I leave behind a body of work that shows, a certain amount of dignity and a certain amount of respect and beauty that is not shown. And if we leave it to the mainstream media, it's not going to show those sides of us. We have to do it ourselves. So these are some photos that I've taken in Ghana. And this is a project that I've been currently working on called Blackbirds. It's about young dancers in the dance state of Harlem. This photo has won an award, American Photography Award. And again, this is just me wanting to showcase, the beauty of Black people and just change the narrative, So I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. All right, I'm at time, so that's it. But please, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer as much as I can at the end. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to pass it over to Tracy.
Hey everybody, good job, Idris. I'm Tracy Dendy, she, her. I'm a senior UX designer on Kathy's interactive design team. And I also started out going to college thinking I wanted to be an animator. And while my college experience wasn't that valuable to me, I eventually, I did get to experience a lot of different kinds of industries. And so I tried animation and I realized I had no patience for it. I don't have the patience to perfect a walk cycle or bone a model that's beautiful. But I did practice some game design, and from there I learned that I loved to make up a story that's an interactive experience and do platform designs. And so I learned eventually that what I love to do is actually organize and take stuff that other people have created and make it work. So that led me to UX. I started out after school going into graphic design because it was easy enough. And here's I'm going to share. Okay. Are y'all seeing it?
Yes, we can see.
Thanks. So that was me in college. And eventually, through all my different random jobs of trying different things, I found UX design, which is what I realized I loved doing the whole time. I loved to solve puzzles and sort buttons and everything I loved doing as a kid. I found out that UX is that. So now I'm super corporate and I'm not nearly as cool as Idris. So let's get into what UX is real quick. I love this image of the sidewalk is what I always think of when I think of UX. You have a design that's your intention, what you wanted everyone to do, which was go that way. And everyone said, I'm gonna just walk wherever I wanna walk. And so that's when you realize you need to be designing for your user versus whatever you think looks better. Same with the ketchup bottles. And this is also to explain the difference between UI and UX because it's often mixed up and it's the same thing, but UX is more what UI lets you do. So the UI of the squeezy bottle lets the UX be good. So now I work at HBO. I've been there for 5 years, I think, and I do a lot of data collecting and research and talking to people, and I work mostly on the website hbo.com, and I love it. Most of my job day to day is nitpicking websites, which I'm sure everyone has been able to do in their lives. And so I'll show one example real quick of what I do. So we had this page that we wanted people to click on this big purple button that says get HBO Max because we have HBO Max now, but we also have regular HBO that other people want to click on too. And we also found out that 77% of our users on this page are on their phones. So why weren't we getting good clicks on this big purple button that's cool and everyone was clicking on this little tiny blue button? So if you look at the actual user experience and the thumb map of where you can reach on your phone, the button that we didn't want people to click on is the one that's right in the green spot. And so we had to try different designs and we pushed the button down and now it's in the green spot and the other button we don't want you to push is all the way down. So then we go back and get some data and we see that it didn't make a huge difference, but it's slowly increasing the amount of purple clicks to blue clicks, and that's all that matters. So really, this is my job. You don't know what's going to happen and you keep testing things, and I love it. I think that this is the best puzzle to get to solve all the time. And so if you realize that creating stuff from scratch isn't your deal and you like to organize and make things work, this is it. This is the best. And now let's move on. Sorry. Yeah. I forget who's next.
I think it's me.
Kyla. Kyla's next. Go,
Hi,
Kyla.
everyone. Thanks, Tracy. I love your UI UX memes. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Cool. Yes. All right, so as you know, my name's Kyla, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior designer on the interactive design team here at HBO, where I design social media content and brand campaigns. I've been making computer art since I was a kid, and I found out when I was probably around 16 that I could be a graphic designer. So I really pursued that with my decision making and what was available to me at the time. So I'm going to use this time to talk about what my design background is and how I use graphic design, specifically fonts and treatments, to speak to a range of audiences. So after graduating from art school, where I studied graphic design, I wanted storytelling to be the main focus of my design work. I also knew that I wanted to design for a younger pop culture audience at first, so I sought out jobs at sports companies, anything having to do with counterculture, and TV channels like Nickelodeon and MTV. I was mostly attracted to brands like this because I felt confident in my skills to make things that would fit their particular aesthetic, and I just really enjoyed them as a consumer as well. So my first job actually ended up being at World Wrestling Entertainment. I watched it as a kid. I was admittedly a fan, and I designed the print and digital versions of the WWE magazine. So technology and new practices were always emerging constantly, which I'm sure is continuing for you guys as well as you're learning new programs. And it was important to stay at the forefront of those trends. In this case, it was turning a printed magazine into a digital product and learning the best ways to design for mobile and tablets. So at WWE, I learned how important it was to know your audience. In this case, it was the WWE universe, and create visuals to keep them engaged. Each wrestler, if some of you are fans, also have their own brand and their own audience. I was personally an Undertaker fan who is shown here. So he was my favorite to design for personally. I actually find that the two companies are relatively similar. HBO has, the HBO brand has a general audience and a specific brand style. So individual shows speak to a range of audiences through their storytelling, and we have to know how to design for them, as Kathy was showing you earlier in her presentation. So as a designer now, I largely focus on typography and color to achieve formulas for specific audiences. And through my time working as a designer, I've developed certain processes and tricks that I've used at the different places that I've worked in order to do this. So I'm going to run through a couple instances just to kind of show you how I do that. And it's really one of my biggest interests in graphic design. So this is a piece that I created at WWE. This is AJ Lee. She was a wrestler who had a punk rebel persona. So for this feature article, we used symbols from her brand, such as spiders and skulls with bows. We kept a color palette of pink, black, and white, which her fans associated with her with. I redrew a typewriter font for the main text and made a lot of fake teenage journals that we made for the photo shoot to really like support her angsty character and also like who she was as a character on WWE. So similar to this at HBO, where I used handwriting, we have a show called Vice Principals. It's an adult comedy about two dueling vice principals of a high school. And since the whole show was mainly set in a school, we used the aesthetic of a high school notebook for our social content pieces. The hand-drawn style supported the storyline of the show and created intrigue for our fans on social media. So another approach that I developed over time was to design type to evoke a certain time period. These are title designs for a video piece where I styled fonts with specific colors and treatments to communicate decades as they specifically related to wrestling throughout the years. They're also designed to behave as a cohesive set because it was a video piece. And I did these a while ago. So 30 years ago shown here actually represents the 80s. With neon triangles and gradients. And then at HBO, I worked on a show called The Deuce, which is set in 1970s Times Square. I researched fonts used in the 70s and used some Photoshop tricks with my color palette to make the pieces look like they really came from this specific era. So the audience would immediately understand the setting of the show. So yeah, there are plenty more instances where you can use these tricks when you're speaking to specific audiences and representing different projects, and you can kind of just experiment on your own too. I'm sure you guys have started to explore this when finding the right fonts to pair with your work if you're starting to get into that. But my main advice right now is really when you're getting started to learn your audience, stay informed, continue to pursue all of your personal interests and the things that you know best, because you can definitely build your career from it. So thank you, and I'm excited to answer any questions you have later. And now I'm going to pass this off to Doris.
Hey, how's it going? I'm gonna share my screen right now. Okay. Hi, I'm Doris Liu. I go by she, her pronoun. I'm currently a junior production designer at HBO's interactive design team. But even though my job title has the word design in it, the work I actually do is a lot more interdisciplinary than that. I not only do graphic design, but also illustration and motion graphics as well. So I actually went to art school and graduated with an illustration degree. After starting my career in editorial illustration, I taught myself graphic design and motion graphics to help my illustration work fit better into different forms and be more flexible. Um, Actually, after college, one of my biggest worries was not being sure if I was able to find my creative voice. Since my work is very heavily stylized and illustrative, I really wasn't sure if there's going to be a place for my work to fit into society at the time. At the time, I thought I needed to pick between going really hard and being heavily stylized or open up and be flexible so I could work at companies and fit with their brand. But I was actually lucky enough after school to be able to try work that can cover both of these, both ends of that creative spectrum. So just to give you guys a good idea, this is my editorial illustration work right now, the kind of work that I do on my own, but this is specifically for magazines like Plan Sponsor or New York Times, NBC, and Then Magazine. So, and then showing you guys the other end of the spectrum is the work that I do for HBO, which is, this is an illustrated safety manual for the show Watchmen. In this Watchmen world, there are these occasional squid falls where the sky will like rain little squids. So this is like a extra content that extends that universe, and it would be a safety card that you would find in like a typical person's car glove box. Then going after that, this is actually a really fun project of an adult coloring book that I worked with Idris and Kyla on, the previous speakers. And this is for the season 4 premiere of High Maintenance. This was a map activity that included scenes from the show, and we made like animated stickers based off of the illustrations for the Giphy platform. And I just put them on top of the map. Okay, and this is some Giphy stickers that I made with Kyla for the show We're Here. It's a show that's really funny and warm and positive. So we had a lot more flexibility with the copy we were using. And it was like so much fun to try and integrate the type with these accents and illustrations and sparkly textures. So onto style. I think after having the privilege to experience both my editorial illustration practice and HBO, I think what I realized the most is that the style is really not limited to the way you draw or render things. It's present in everything about you, whether that is your knowledge or the way you create your characters, the way you depict your culture, your sense of humor, or even your compassion and your values. So these are all going to be reflected in your work no matter what company you work at or what branding guidelines you have to follow. So I really believe that your unique voice can add so much special quality and value to your work, especially since you guys are new, fresh, young animators and artists. So thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciated being able to share that. I hope if you guys have questions, and be so excited to answer. But I'm gonna hand it off for now to our animator, Jardley.
Sorry, hey everyone. Just gonna share my screen real quick. Okay, so hi, I'm Jardley. I'm a non-binary Black queer, and my pronouns are they, them. And I make sure to tell you that I'm non-binary, I'm Black, and I'm queer. For those of you that can relate, you know, if you don't have many people that you know, you have me. So I'm a motion graphics animator on the interactive design team here at HBO. typically I work on 15 to 30-second short form content, but I've also worked on longer form content, such as like a lyric video that we did for Game of Thrones. So that isn't where I started though. I didn't go to school for animation. My foundation is in the arts. It's predominantly painting and drawing. That's always been my focus. But I briefly went to SVA for illustration, but then I realized that that wasn't for me and decided I wanted to move on to film production at Brooklyn College. I chose to move on to film production because I was trying to figure out like what are the things that I like to do as a kid. And one of the things was like figuring out like creating stories and making tangible stuff. So while at Brooklyn College, I was hired as an illustrator's assistant at a one-person studio called Crumpled. There I was tasked with character design, background design, assisting in figuring out the storyboard as well as the script. And this is one of the projects that we worked on where I was just an illustrator. It was like I had to draw soldiers that were a part of the Civil War. So, and I would projects that his name was Ravi, that he would finalize. I thought this looks really cool. These animations look really cool. I would love to learn how to do this. And I asked him, would he be willing to teach me some After Effects? And he was totally down for it. So for this project, which was a dating app, I worked on both the characters, the background characters, as well as this was like my first animation thing. So I animated the background characters. So once that time with Crumpled was over, you know, I got one other client based off of like sending him my portfolio that I had done at Crumpled. But other than that, like everything that I decided to put in my reel was completely fake. And I think like that's also my advice to you is like, if you don't really have like client work, it's totally fine for you to just like make something and to make work that you want to be hired for. So what I made sure to do was put character animation, typography stuff. I'm very passionate about education and teaching people about something that is important to me. So I made sure to include that stuff too. So once that got off the ground, I was able to get a couple of motion projects, but I also made sure to keep in touch with folks that I had been sending my previous reel out to, but for whatever reason, we weren't able to like work together. It could have been due to timing. It could have been due to like the project is falling through. And that's actually what I did with my existing art director right now. It's like, while I was at my last job, I was at Ink Magazine. I made sure to keep in contact with him and just send him my stuff. And then within like two months after I left Ink Magazine, we were able to work together. So now I'm currently at HBO. I've been here, it's gotta be 2 years now. And I work on different shows from Game of Thrones to Euphoria to Lovecraft Country. And I work on a variety of stuff. These have been gifts. The two like animals is actually a show that we have called Animals. I did not create the characters. That's how the show looks. But you know, for all of these shows, for all these movies, for all these docs, we always try to make sure that the projects that we're making are in line with the mood, style, and tone of the show. So for Animals, it was very like jerky stop motion. That's what I tried to incorporate. Game of Thrones, I'm sure you all know, tried to incorporate like the title treatment of the actual Game of Thrones into Mother of Dragons. We're trying to include elements that they use like fire, as well as just like, I can't remember exactly what that element is, but yeah, we're just trying to use other stuff that they've already included into the show. So Atlanta Missing and Murdered is a doc that we recently, I think it happened like before the summer. And it's about the like missing boys, Black boys of the 70s. And this, I had to do about a couple title cards for like our behind the scenes episodic content. And this one was supposed to be like in line with the title, the theme, the opening theme graphic of the actual show. So it's very like fluid, it feels dreamy. Random Acts of Fineness is one of the first projects that I got to work with my art director on when I started. And this show was just like, you had so much creative flexibility because the show is innately creative. For this one, we were doing like a fake ad that we posted up on social. And it was just like, I think a product that the character in the show, it's supposedly supposed to help you do all these things. And I got to incorporate like some character, you know, walking cycles in there, which was cool. Euphoria, I mean, y'all are pretty much like the audience for this show. Like we made sure to keep y'all in mind. The overview theme that we had for this was like vibes, and so we wanted to make things that were eye-catching, that were very visual. We also relied on music, so I am gonna play with music. No. Ain't nobody gonna hurt you, so sleep with those pretty lines. And then this one was a promo for the last season of Insecure. I'm not sure how many of you watch it, but there's always like every season there's a show within a show. This time it was like a crime parody for this show called Looking for LaToya. And we did a promo for the podcast, and this was really fun to do. Just gonna play with audio.
What happened? Who's responsible? Did anyone see this coming? Could anyone have stopped it? Is LaToya just missing? Or was she murdered?
And then these are just the links to everything, which I can also share with y'all. So we're definitely ready to open this up to questions. I hope y'all had an enjoyable time listening to all of us.
Thank you all. Your words were incredibly inspiring for our participants, and you were absolutely exceptional. A lot of what you've shared has clearly resonated with so many of them, and so I'd love to start off by asking, specifically because this question came up with a lot of our participants, you know, how did you find your voice? Sumaya asked, and she'd love to ask each of you that question, if you don't mind my. I don't know if maybe Idris, would you like to start?
Yeah, for sure. Still finding my voice. I think that, you know, in the beginning, you know, when you're trying to learn something, you have a tendency to copy the people whose work inspires you. So after you go through a period of copying, you start realizing like, I don't want to copy somebody else. I have my own expression. So then you start to, you know, move into your own form of expression, but using like the people who you've copied sort of as like that reference point. And then the more you experience, the more you expose yourself to, the more you start learning what your technical style is. But then for me, finding my voice is getting to a certain level of talent, and then now finding a way to figure out what is important to me, whether it's emotionally, whether it's what's going on in society. There's a lot of injustices happening right now. So what is a way that I can take those important things and then bridge it together with my talent, my skill set, and then I'm creating work that is not only beautiful and emotive and expressive, but then also has some sort of political statement or something that can help inspire or change somebody's life. So that's sort of, and I'm still finding my voice because I'm finding out ways of speaking about things that are important to me, but while still using my craft, you know?
I appreciate your sharing that. Kyla, would you speak to how you found your voice?
Sure. So at the beginning, I guess I kind of knew what I was good at when I was younger, and I knew some skills that I had that would get me hired, mostly with my hand lettering and my illustration. So I really clung on to that in my career trajectory. But as for really finding my voice, I agree with Idris, like, you're always changing and evolving and really trying to express yourself in different ways with, you know, all of the jobs that you hold, and especially the people that you meet when you're, you know, working at a job. So I think like those things really affect you. Actually, also to call out Idris again, he really helps me like get some projects where I can work on my illustration a little bit more, and I can still find more opportunities to integrate like new things that I want to try out in my job, which we get to do a lot at HBO as well. So it's ongoing. It's always a process. So I try not to be too hard on myself and try to explore as much as possible.
What you've said really resonates when it comes to collaboration and working with your colleagues and challenging one another. So I appreciate you highlighting that. There's so much importance in teamwork and in collaboration, particularly in this environment. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Jaredly, how about you?
So I think like Idris, we're always like growing and figuring out our styles. But, you know, I come more from like having tried to figure out my career through an illustrator standpoint. That question always is something that like one way or another you're gonna like come across. But what I try to always like narrow in on is like just keep producing and your style will just come to you. Like there's not really a way that I don't personally think that you need to be trying to replicate or like cultivate some sort of a style. I really think you just keep working on it. Somebody's going to be like, wow, I can see your work, because that has happened to me. And I was surprised because I thought that I was just doing random stuff.
Thank you for that. Tracy, how did you find your voice?
So, well, what little voice I have is mostly soul searching therapy. But I would say that in terms of like UX doesn't have much of voicing. It's more working with other people's work, which I love. But I do know that whenever I've like a lot of the people I went to school with and people I know, they tried to say that their voice was them doing what was easy for them, and I think that that was a mistake. Lots of times you still have to really work hard to master the thing that you like to do so that you can develop a voice without it just being that I only like to draw in PowerPoint because that's where I'm comfortable. It's like that's not a voice, that's not a style. It's just you being closed-minded about what you can do.
Very well said. Thank you. And Doris, I'd love for you to share.
Hi. I think what it just said, like, I think that was a really great response, and it's actually like something that I feel as well. But I guess to add like anecdote to that, when I was actually in art school, the first few years of doing illustration, I was also copying, like very, very like intense copying of like my idols, illustrators that I love. It's very embarrassing. I would never show that work in public, but like it was through that copying that made me realize like see the behind the scenes techniques of the artists, and also like I pushed myself to like every week I will study a new artist, upcoming, like maybe not well known. Like I think once you have a really good idea of like the professional world of illustration in your mind of like all the people who are already, all the work that is already out there, it's true that you can use that information to copy, but you can also use that information to see what doesn't exist. And that once you start thinking like what doesn't exist, then that's the space for you to make your work. So I think it's good to surround yourself with like a bunch of examples of like illustrators you love, just so you can see something new you can create. Yeah.
One thing I would suggest also is sort of mix up where you get your inspiration from, right? So when I was in advertising, if I was working on, say if I was working on a cosmetic product, right? I'm not gonna look at other cosmetic products to see what they're doing and how they're laying out their designs. I'm going to look at, I might look at cars, right? I might look at what they're doing for Mercedes. And then, so when I'm designing something for a cosmetic, I'm using an aesthetic from like Mercedes, right? And I kind of find a way to bridge those together so that my stuff is not looking just like all the other cosmetic brands out there, right? So if you're able to sort of like mix and match your different interests and your different, the things that have meaning to you, then you're able to start creating something that's unique based on the things that interest you. I think a lot of our creation has to come from the things that we are interested in, because that's where you start to be unique, and you're not, nobody can really copy your interest or copy your life experience. You can't copy that, you know, it's going to come across fake. But if you're genuine to yourself and the things that matter to you, and you find a way to put that into your art, that can't be duplicated, you know? And I think that's part of what your voice is.
Yeah, that really resonates, Idris. I really appreciate that. No one can copy your life experience. Thank you. Um, you know, we're obviously, we touched upon this in previous sessions or previous Fridays, but, you know, we're obviously living through very disconcerting and very heavy times, you know, not just experiencing one, but several pandemics. And with that said, Serenity asks this really important question, you know, what gives you the motivation to keep going, you know, as artists or as people? And with that said, you know, does anyone want to sort of jump in and answer that to start?
I guess something. Um, it can be very discouraging to work on, especially something in the entertainment industry, and to see how things turn out. But the thing that gets me going again when I have those down moments is the stuff that I know that I love to do. So the thing that I love to that I can get lost in for a whole day, and if I spend a day doing that, it reignites what I like about my job and what I like about what I do, so that all the other noise that gets really exhausting uh, is drowned out.
Yeah, to add to that too, one thing that really keeps me going is that I think I ended up in a career in entertainment because I like entertaining people. And every time, like even when I was younger, designing my spaces for my friends in high school, I've always wanted to create work for other people. So in this case, I love making work for fans. And then if I ever like get down on my work, I know where it's going. And that's what keeps me going, I think, for the most part. Even if I don't really want to design, I know that I'm kind of feeding the world.
I think for me, do you mind? Can I jump in?
I don't know, please.
Oh, okay, okay. So for me, I feel like you have to have a very, very, very strong why for what you want to do. And if your why is strong enough, then the wins and the hows are going to happen. It's going to work itself out because your why is strong enough to keep you moving forward. For me, I always knew I wanted to draw, and I wanted to be creative professionally. And I felt like uh, I had talent, and I also worked hard. And what would that look like if I worked really hard with the talent that I had? You know, I felt like that would take me places, and it was a little discouraging at a lot, a lot of times growing up, because I would be the only Black person in like my office. I would be like the only Black designer or art director. And you know, for me, the why was, all right, well, I'll shoulder this burden so that, and work really hard and do a good job, so that, unfortunately, it feels like I have to like carry that burden for like every Black creative that's going to come behind me. Like I have to be that representative. It's an unfair burden, but if I'm in that position, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to do the best job that I can, so that I can essentially leave a good impression that can open the door and keep the door open for other young Black creatives to come behind me. So that's the why, and that's what motivates me as an art director, and that's what motivates me as a photographer, and that's what motivates me to create this podcast, is to just show that there's Black creative out there, and that we should be taken seriously. So that's my why, and that's what keeps me motivated and keeps me up late nights and up early mornings.
Thank you. Jardley, did you want to add?
Sure. So I think to piggyback a bit off of what Idris said, like about the strong why, I have always like being an artist, being within the arts, like that has always been my focus. Like there has never been, it's like any other job that I've ever done, in my mind, without me even trying, it's always a temporary thing until I go to what I'm trying to do. So, you know, that is always going to be the drive, no matter what, no matter a pandemic, no matter any issues that's happening in my life. If this is a setback, I'm going to jump right back in. Like I think a couple of years back, I took a break from illustration because I didn't like where it was going. I felt like I was trying to, this is back when I was trying to like be a freelance illustrator. I was trying so hard to like create a portfolio, keep putting stuff out and trying to get views. And I didn't like to live in that sort of bubble. So I think I say that because, you know, especially within this pandemic, you got to realize you need to take the time out for yourself. If you got to take a break, that's absolutely fine. You need to like reflect on exactly what it is that you want to do. And then when you're in a better shape, you jump right back into it. So that's really all it is. It's like, you make sure that you have some sort of focus, but when you need the time to step away, step away. And people are just going to have a way to around that.
Self-care, and apologies for the sound in my background, but Kathy, did you want to jump in?
I would love to answer this question. I'm gonna mostly stay off the mic, but yeah. So I mean, God, you guys, like I'm like about to cry. Yeah, I think that like for me, I didn't really talk about myself, but I came of age slightly earlier than some of these folks, but I think that like what I noticed in my experiences, like growing up in the industry, I saw like a very like particular type of person succeeding. And I'm not just talking about like racial background, I'm also talking about personality too. Like I saw these like, you know, super type A people who were like very good at being loud and talking and like filling up all the space in the conversation, kind of being succeeding. And I saw a lot of cliques, like my first job, it was like it felt so cliquey, and all the people were like hanging out and drinking and like doing drugs together all the time, and they would come in at noon and they would leave at midnight, and it just didn't work for me. And I think that like I internalized for a long time that I was never going to be an art director. I was never going to be a creative director, because I just like wasn't that kind of person. Like I just couldn't be like that. And I think that what happened for me, and it wasn't fast. I can't even like put my finger on it really, was that like I got to a point in my career where I felt like I had a point of view. Like I felt like I knew how to like make a project work better than the way that I saw other people running them. Like I knew that at some point I got to the point of view that you know, it's fine to not be the same as other people, because who you are is probably like really, really cool and like potentially even better. And I really like kind of held on to this dream that I don't want to be contributing to all of this kind of toxic workplace stuff that I saw like coming up in the industry. And I really want to like put people on my team that I love, that are like good people, that are going to be like shining out in the world. And like, oh my God, I'm not going to cry. Yeah, just, I don't know. Every time you guys talk, I'm just like, you guys are such good people. It's so inspirational to hear you talk. All right, I'm going to shut up now.
Kathy, you're making me tear up too, because all of you are just so inspiring, and so many of us relate to what you were saying. And, you know that I myself always struggled with the idea that, you know, you don't always have to be the loudest person in the room to be heard. And that's something that we don't always realize when we're coming through our careers, as it were. So thank you very much for sharing that. Another question that one of our participants has asked, Jennifer, she wants to know, what was the biggest struggle that you're going through, whether it's something mental or anything with your work? What are the biggest challenges you might have had throughout your career, or even more recently? I I don't want to put anyone on the spot in the event that something is a bit more tangible for you to share. If there's someone who'd like to.
I can go.
Wonderful, thank you.
Repeat the question one more time. You said something about what's the most challenging or most.
Sorry, I'm muted. Basically, what's one of the most biggest challenges or struggles you might have had, whether it's more recent or career-wise, and whether it's, you know, something you might have related to, you know, more mentally during this time, or could it have been something within your career that you'd like to sort of disclose to our wonderful participants?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, something that's been big is this feeling of feeling like I'm an imposter, like because I'm usually working in predominantly white spaces, and I'm this kid from Brooklyn. You know, I grew up running around the streets, and you know, it almost feels like, how did I get here? Did I like sneak in the window or something? And how long is it gonna last before they discover that I'm a hack, that I don't belong here, you know? And that's the feeling that's carried with me, you know, from the, you know, as soon as I got into like in a corporate space. And speaking of some colleagues, it's a feeling that is shared across the board. And I feel like not just with other Black folks or people of color, but just in like a creative space, it's like we're putting our emotions and our feelings and stuff into art that's going to go out to the world and be judged. And there's a certain amount of vulnerability that comes with that. So there are times when I just feel like, yeah, I'm going to be discovered, that I'm really not as good as I think I am. And that's a challenge. And for me, that kind of forces me to work harder, but working harder doesn't necessarily, it's not always healthy. You know, like sometimes I don't know when to turn off the switch, because I feel like I have to keep working in order to prove to myself and to validate the job that I'm at, to let them know, like, yeah, I deserve to be there. I belong there. I'm skilled and talented enough. And that drive pushes me forward, and I learn a lot of skills, and I'm able to share a lot of different creative things. But at a certain point, that I need to balance it out and let that drive come from within, and not because I feel like I need to be validated from an external source.
So many of our, I appreciate you sharing that, because so many of our speakers the past several weeks have touched upon that feeling of being an imposter, or that feeling of imposter syndrome, of not knowing one's worth, and being in spaces that are presenting these feelings of discomfort. So thank you for your transparency. Would anyone else like to address this question? Doris.
Building off of what Idris said, which I think is like amplified during this pandemic when we're like isolated. But I feel like when I'm in a creative occupation, sometimes I feel like I have a very limited amount of creativity inside me. And sometimes I feel like if I'm like a sponge, and like creativity is like inside me, like I will make the best work when it's like at its max. But some days I really just feel like I've been squeezed like so dry that like there's literally like nothing I can think about that would make work the same quality as back then. But I think I've come to realize, especially during this pandemic, when I have more self-reflection, is that I can make like many different sponges. It doesn't have to just be like one sponge. And like when one of them is dry, I can find creativity elsewhere. I love watching tutorials. So I've been really into motion graphics, and I will try to fill up like how I feel there. And if I get tired of design, I think it's okay to be tired, and I'll watch cooking tutorials. But yeah, like I notice too, as I fill up my knowledge in other areas and I feel less tired doing so, it comes back and also informs the original, like, whether that be illustration or design. So yeah, That's what I think.
Thank you, Doris.
Let me know if you can still hear me. I've been trying to like wait for the lawnmower to stop. So what I struggle with, and it's always been there throughout the years, but first, like I think within this year, it's felt much more amplified. It might be because I'm actually trying to tackle it much more, but it's struggling with self-worth and whether or not like I'm viewed as like as important as someone else. Is my voice going to be as respected as somebody else? And always just sort of second guessing myself depending on who's in the room. What has helped me and what I try to do more and more is to journal, especially when it's like a situation that I've been in that was very highly stressed that day, is to journal immediately after and to try to really detail out everything that had happened. That's where I can sort of see like I can see the thought pattern that I was experiencing during that time. And what my therapist that we've talked about last week, I think the exercise that she's told me to do is like start to record yourself, like some sort of an affirmation, and do it in the first person and just listen to it morning and night so that it can start to like seep in. So I think there's other stuff, but that's more of the like immediate struggle that I deal with, and I'm sure other people deal with stuff too.
Thank you for touching upon a very, very valid feeling of questioning one's self-worth. I think, you know, when we're kids, we think that when we're adults and we're finally at a certain age, we're going to get over it right away and we're going to be more confident and we're going to feel that we have more value. And that definitely does not go away as you get older, and it doesn't go away. And I think your advice is really, really poignant, and I might have to take it myself. Hassan is asking as well, if any of you could go back in time and have the chance to change something within your life or your career, would you go back and change the way that you do things? Or would you follow the same path and do everything all over again? If the latter is chosen, he asks, does that mean that all the mistakes and errors that you face is all part of the experience needed to become who you are today? It's a really great question, Hassan. Thank you. Is there someone who in particular who would love to jump in first?
I'll jump in. Oh, Charlie?
Yeah. I think I kind of always ask myself that question. There's times where I'm like, yes, I would have gone back and like had hoped that like I would have had more self-esteem at that point, because who knows where I would have been by now. But you know, there's a really important part of my life that I don't think I would have, had I not crossed it, I wouldn't be here. And that's like, I went to, you know, I told you all that I started in arts the whole time. When I was, you know, we were all like seniors trying to figure out where we're going to go to school. We're always given that storyline that you start off in like primary school, educate like that stuff, and then you go into college and you know you go to work, all that stuff. But I never really like thought like I was always just going to be an artist, so I never really thought about like, oh, there's a college. So I just decided to like I just went to the same art school that my high school teacher went to. I was like, well, I'll just go to that one. Went to SVA. Like my mom and my guidance counselor were like, we can't afford this. Why are you doing this? And I was just like, what we're fed is like where you go to school matters. That will put you into the door. So I was like, I'm gonna force this to happen. Ended up having to like drop out of it, I think. So literally like 2 months within my sophomore year, because I couldn't afford it to go. And I thought, my God, the path, right? I was supposed to graduate I went to college in 2009. I was supposed to graduate in 2013. This path is broken. But what I ended up doing was like, and I felt a lot of shame during that time. But what I ended up doing was like, took some time off, tried to figure out what I wanted to do, and decided to go in undeclared and purchase college. And I kind of hated it because like I'm so used to being in the city. It was like you were seeing the same 5 people every day. And so I left that and thought, that's it, college is done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it was really my mom that was like, you know, you're not just going to sit here and not get some sort of an education. What is your plan? And so I begrudgingly decided I'm going to go to Brooklyn College. I wanted to do NYU, and again, me being insane, because how am I going to afford that? But I went to Brooklyn College instead, did film production. And I think even during orientation, I said to my mom, look, if I don't like this, I'm going to drop out. And she was like, okay, fine. But I ended up loving it. And I remember people when I was younger saying, like, you will know what you will know when you go to that college, if that college is right for you. And I immediately felt that. I don't think that I would have been here had I not had that path. There's just so many. I went to 3 different colleges. That's not, you know, that's not a typical story, but it is a story. And I'm sure a lot of people go through that. So that's why I can't say that I have any regrets, because it is what led me to here.
I want to say real quick, as someone who told herself that she had to stick it out in the major I chose and the college I chose, whatever happened, no matter how unhappy I was, that was a total waste of my time. And my major was called computer art. It meant nothing, and it still means nothing. And I honestly wish that I had been brave enough to leave and try something else, or at least switch majors or something. But I really think I wasted my parents' money. I mean, sadly, and with all the privilege I had, I wasted it. And honestly, what I learned most was how to teach myself things. And that's the skill that I use the most every day. And your portfolio doesn't have to be from school. Your portfolio can be just what you learned from a tutorial.
100%. Like, portfolio is really important. Showing your work is important, but nobody, like, I mean, I can't predict the future, but of course, but like, no one even asked me to prove that I went to school until I started working at HBO. They asked me for my diploma, and I was like, what? I think it's like in a closet or something. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I would plus 1 to fancy college, not necessary.
No.
I have to, oh, sorry, Kyla, I just want to quickly jump in for a second because I really want to hear you speak. I must reiterate the importance of having a different career path within the industry as well. It's really, really important. Some of the most senior positions I've seen to date at several studios and post-production and animation studios and HBO, not everyone went to a fancy college, and nor do I ever, as a recruiter, want to recruit someone who went to the fanciest of colleges. If you have a very different journey and you're self-motivated and you get that job done and make that real and do the work on your own, that's even more impressive. You know, that's even more exciting, and you create inspiration and opportunity for others around you, and that's very special. Sorry, Kyle, I just wanted to sort of jump in there.
That's perfect leeway, because I did go to like a hardcore art school, and I think like even when you have the privilege of doing that, you can make so many mistakes along the way too. And I always look back, especially on that question, thinking about what I could have done better to be in a better position now. But I don't think I would change anything. I didn't really spend as much time activated in school because I was working on the side in the restaurant business and being social and not paying attention to my studies too much. I always think about like what would have changed if I were to have done that. If I were to take a different job, if I studied somewhere else. They're questions that always kind of run through my mind when I'm at a point where I'm struggling with my career. But then I realize that every place that I've been and every person that I've met like throughout my career has really been important into like helping shape me into the designer that I am now. And I've really just learned everything in every job that I've had, more so than in school.
Beautifully
Yeah,
said.
I think the life experiences we have at the moments we have them determine the decisions that we make in those moments. So I would not change my path because I'm happy with where I'm at in life. I'm happy with how my career has blossomed, and I'm grateful for all the jobs that I was fired from, because I've been fired a lot. And this is for all of those out there who've been fired and who are going to get fired. Like, it doesn't mean that your life is over. You know, you're just finding those jobs you get fired from, or that lay you off or whatever, is just setting you up to have tougher skin, so that you realize that life is not over. You are going to bounce back. You're going to figure out your plan. And if you have that why as your North Star, whatever job you're at, it doesn't really matter. You're going to keep going and still finding out what makes the most sense for you. When I graduated college, see, I have this thing where I try to learn and get as much value as I can for free or very cheap, right? So when I was in college, we had a resident advisor, and a resident advisor, they lived, they had their room and their meal was paid for by the school. I said, oh shoot, how do I get that? The next year I became a resident advisor, so all of that was being taken care of, right? I graduated with like $10,000 in school debt. When I went to grad school at Savannah College of Art and Design, they were charging crazy amount. I went there for maybe 2 semesters and came back with like 30 grand in debt. So I dropped out of my chance, because I remember I had an internship, and I asked this woman, do I really need to get a master's degree in motion graphics to do this job? And she was like, no, half these people don't have their bachelor's in this. Like, this person went to school for accounting, this person went for pre-med or whatever, but they found After Effects, they realized they were good at it, and they just kept going. And I was like, so wait a minute, wait. So I'm about to spend like 170 grand on a degree that I don't even need. I said, oh, I called my roommates and said, y'all can keep my stuff, you can sell it, it don't matter, I'm not coming back, right? And I stayed here and figured it out on my own. And I think by taking initiative and taking ownership over where you want your life to go, where you, not just your career, your life, right? Like, if you're creative, you can create your life. You know, the same way you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and you're sketching and you're creating an animation or whatever, you can do that with your life. You know what I mean? So I would not change anything. But what I would say is, start before you're ready. Don't think that you have to be 100% prepared and 100% ready before you begin something. You don't. You just need to start, and you need to share. When you create something and you share it, you are then saying, this work no longer belongs to me, and I'm okay sharing it, because sharing it is the gift that you give to the world. And you don't know if that gift is going to help change somebody else's life and their perspective. You have to share. And when you share, you get feedback, and you get thicker skin. So start now and share, and your work is going to grow, and your path is just going to open up for you.
So many notes I'm taking myself. Start before you're ready. If you are creative, you can create your life. It's incredible words. Thank you. Just, I want to ask another question that Zamia has just included in the Q&A. She's asking, if you have been put in an uncomfortable situation due to your race, how do you handle that in a professional way? It's a really, really important question.
Man, still learning. At a certain point, I think right now we're at a very interesting point in this country. We are at a point where a lot of people are witnessing the injustices that are happening to Black folks, to people of color, to, you know, the queer community. Like, there's just injustice all over the place. But what's happening is there's like a collective courage happening, where people are finding their voice and finding the courage to speak up about these injustices. So on the one hand, I feel like there's a lot of guilt from corporations who may realize that they may not have been taking diversity as seriously as they can. And because of that, that's that's opening up opportunities to have conversations. I think that it's important. That's a really good question, because there's this fear that if we experience some sort of racism or some sort of, prejudice at work, that speaking up about it is going to ruffle feathers, and then we're going to eventually lose our job and lose our livelihood. I think that it's important to document whatever you experience, keep a paper trail, several paper trails, and you have to learn who your allies are, and your allies, they can be people that identify with who you are, like your race or your gender, your background, or they don't have to just identify with that. They're just somebody who you believe is in your corner, despite your differences and your similarities. Find those allies and confide in them as well. And, but I think we have to really be courageous to speak up when something unjust happens. And it's not just when it happens to you directly, it's when you witness it happening to somebody else as well. And you hope that just as a community, somebody else will speak up about an injustice that they see you encounter, and if we are holding each other accountable, we're holding our jobs, our corporations accountable for the wrongs that happen at our workplace, things will start to shift. But I think it's a really good question. And I think it's just a matter of like also how much respect we have for ourselves to say, you know what, if my job is allowing this disrespect to happen, it's not a place I want to work at, and it's unfortunate that you might have to pick up and start from scratch and go find something else, but it's either that or lose your sanity, lose your self-respect. And there's a lot of PTSD. I'm not sure if all of you are aware of post-traumatic stress disorder, but we experience that when we deal with racism and prejudices. And so it's either remove yourself from that unhealthy space, or stay there and work in a toxic environment, and you start to just deteriorate from within spiritually. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but because it is a challenging one, it's one that we've been dealing with since we've been in this country, So I hope that gives you some sort of help.
Thank you, Jardley.
It's I just feel like there's so many different answers, and so I feel like this is something that it would just be much more of a meatier thing if I wrote that down rather than answering it here. I don't know. I feel like whatever I can just say some stuff, but hopefully this stuff does resonate. So I think it's important to build community, and I mean like BIPOC community, because those are people that can absolutely relate to exactly what you're talking about. There doesn't have to be such a wide bridge, a gap, starting from 101, trying to get this person to understand. I think it's important to find, it's either books, media, anything that reflects you, but that's also an empowering source of media, because we're not taught in America, and not even just in America, across globally, we're not taught to love ourselves. We're not taught to value ourselves. We're not taught to respect ourselves. We're not taught that what we say, how we feel, what we think is as valuable as somebody else who isn't, especially who isn't Black. So I think it's very important to continue to find media outside of yourself that helps to affirm you. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I have intersectionalities like that I've told y'all. I'm non-binary, I'm Black, I'm queer, and I'm also first generation American. So I'm also, I don't want to say dealing, but I'm also navigating American culture against the culture, the background that I grew up with. And it's not much more conservative, but we're much more, it's like there's respect, there's a lot there because I'm of Haitian descent. I think as you grow as an individual, you learn how to speak up more and more for yourself, as long as you're trying to learn and push yourself to keep talking. Because that's not, you know, especially being queer, like years before I was much more uncomfortable with it. But these days it's like, I'm visibly queer and I don't care about that. And I want people to know that I'm queer. And so it's like that, I think that as Black people especially, you know, the world is changing, but if we can also just continue to push and, you know, basically keep our feet on the gas so that things can change. I don't know. I again, like I said, if I write this down, it's probably going to be much better reflected.
I disagree. I think what you've said is incredibly beautiful and incredibly moving and incredibly poignant and powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and your truth. I mean, it's so important to our participants and to our fellow staff members. I'm really quite heartbroken because I'm over our time limit. And I know we could easily talk for another 15, 16 hours, days. It's been so special. You know, I thank you all so much for your words, for your energy, for your inspiring our participants, and for inspiring me and my fellow colleagues at the Animation Project. You know, I wish we could go on and on, but let's please hope that we can carry on these conversations with one another and with our moving forward and within the space. And
I'm so sorry. Is it, I just don't want to, what's the question? What's the thing? I don't want to ignore Doris if there's anything that she wanted to say, because as a BIPOC, her experience is valid as well.
Yardley, absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. Doris, we'd love to hear you.
I think what Charlie said was so like moving, and I really agree with what they said. But, I guess for me, I feel like I have a lot of privilege, even if I identify not as like I don't know, like even if I have a different like queer identity, I feel like I do have a lot of privilege because I'm like very light-skinned, East Asian. I like could go to art school, but I did feel in the very first jobs that I went to, not being able to see people that looked like me was, or even just seeing any variation people when I entered a workplace made me feel, it did feel hostile, even though there's nothing visibly hostile about it. And I think that's why I felt so, almost like so relieved when I joined HBO, because when I was at the interview table, Kyla, Paolo, like saw like 3 Asian faces, and I just felt so like, I was like, this is it. This is the place I want to work in. I think it's what you just mentioned earlier, that you can't be what you can't see. So I think it's really important to choose the place that you work, see if you feel, because yeah, if you really don't feel good about it, it's gonna be a really toxic environment that, yeah, echoing what you just said too, it will just deteriorate you. So, thanks Charlie for asking me to speak, but yeah, I really liked what Charlie had to say as well.
And I equally appreciate what you had to say and share with us, Doris, as well. So thank you. I kind of just want to sneak in one last question while we're at it. You know what? Let's just get back in there. I know we're running out of time. We have, you know, a few more minutes, but would any of you like to share any final words of wisdom while we're at it to our participants? You know, we obviously really appreciate having you all. Oh, Kathy, you have a little
I have one. Adulthood is a myth. So don't pretend like you're ever going to grow up. It's not real. That's it.
Beautifully said.
I mean, I agree with that. I have a very serious demeanor, but anybody who knows me knows I have like, look at Charlie laughing because they know like how silly I am and goofy I am, and you know I'm a father, so that just gives me a crazy outlet to just be even sillier. But you know, stay playful, stay curious. You know, I think what's important for all of us at HBO, we didn't just wake up as adults and become creative. There was something that sparked when we were very young, and we are fortunate enough to be adults and professionals don't, you know, living a creative life. But remember the earliest moments you discovered that you had an interest in being creative and how good that felt, you know, and remember that every time you sit down to draw, every time you sit down to animate or create, take a picture, do a video, like remember that spark, you know, and try to keep that with you with whatever you do. You know, if you stay youthful, then your mind stays open to new opportunities and new influences and new inspirations, and you know that will prevent your work from being stale and looking the same every time. You know, it all goes back to being unique and finding your own voice. So stay open, stay young, you know, and share, create and share. If one thing you take from this is to create and share, you know, get over that fear of having your work judged.
Thank you.
With Idris, I think you need to always explore your interests and stay really true to yourself with like what got you started in the first place, because that's always going to stay with you. And then one other thing is to stay in touch with all of the people that empower you throughout your career and your path.
Well, thank you, everyone. I had a really difficult time moderating because I myself got so lost in your poetic dynamic and your words and all of this inspiration. So we're really so grateful. We really appreciate each and every single one of you. And again, we wish we could chat to you for another few hours or days. So hopefully we can find ways in which we'll get to spend more time together. So thank you once again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
Guys, thank you.